treat. New listeners, welcome to the community. Returning listeners, welcome back. You already know the flow. Now, we're here to move the needle forward by finding out where we've been, where we're going, and what we're doing. Together, let's make a breakthrough. All right, so let's jump into today's episode with impactful reaction. Now, yes, today's episode is called Impactful Reaction, but really what we're talking about is when we're in those situations where everything is important and everybody is telling you that, everything has to be addressed, nothing can be left off the table. It's overwhelming. I can't really speak for you guys, but I know for me, it can be overwhelming. You can't have one conversation without somebody coming at you, telling you that you should be thinking about something else and how important it is and how frustrating it is that you're not thinking about what they're thinking about in the moment because, whatever it is or whatever it may be, makes you less of a caring person. And that's just, in my opinion, not true. Now, of course, let me know how you feel about it, what you often do when you're in those spaces where people are telling you how you should feel and what you should do. And, what do you do? How do you navigate those spaces? But in today's conversation, though, of course, we're answering the same questions is what are we doing? Where, have we been? And where are we going with dealing with situations like that? And then we're going to walk away from this conversation really trying to figure out, what's needed. Like, how do we work through this? Of course, I'm taking experiences, personal and professional, to figure out, like, how we can walk that line. And then, from there, of course, I want your feedback. And whatever your comments are, I'm going to share that in the next episode because I think it's going to be valuable here. Now, I'm going to just jump right in on what are we doing right now? Well, right now, that's kind of how I preface the whole episode, right? It's, everything is important. So when we talk about homelessness, which is recently in the news, and I don't know why I'm drawing a blank, where the state has signed off on really homelessness being illegal. And I realize I'm not giving it the justice of being more nuanced with it, but at a high level, that's really what it is. It brings an alarm to addressing and talking about homelessness, and to say anything else or to have any other discussions means that really maybe you don't care about this. And I'm only using this conversation as an example, right? But it doesn't mean that you don't care about anything else. That just really means that that's where your attention is. And also in that same space, you're also meant to care about or show empathy for the war that's taking place between Russia and Ukraine. It could also be that maybe your family is going through something and we have to have these kitchen table issues, which is also a coined term that, is used where you want to deal with things that are just like right here, right now that, you can find an answer for. Now, let's just be honest here. All of these things can affect us at different times. And I think there is space for us to have conversations at different degrees about where we can be the best impacting and how we can be most successful in having some of these conversations. But we can't have our hands in every single pot everywhere, right? We have to at some point be able to prioritize without burning ourselves out, because that's really real. And so even having this conversation here, while everything is important, everybody wants us to address everything, it's not real. It's not realistic. And it may also go along with us saying people have to multitask, which, sure, it's a great quality that we think about and we want people to share that they're capable of doing. But when do you have time to give a specific task or a specific topic enough attention to really just explore it and dive deeper and to figure out the ins and the outs of it? And that's kind of where we are, right? We don't really ever have the opportunity to take a beat, ask the questions, and be objective. We're oftentimes leaving a lot of we're leaving a lot of what we'd like to ask up to other people to give us what we think or what they think we need to hear. And it could be that maybe we just have to find a better way of being intentional to make the best impact in that moment. And I think sometimes maybe that will come along with us being able to take a step back from everything for a second, not running away from it, because it's not going anywhere, and that's really a part of life, right? It's really, where are we? Which is, what are we doing? And that's the question we're talking about now. What are we doing? We're in the thick of it. And we have everything happening between what other people are going through, what's happening in pop culture, what's happening in social media, what's happening in the world, what's happening in your life, what's happening with your family, what's happening with your kids, with your friends. Everything is happening around you. And what can you solve right now? What, at this very moment, is going to help you to say, yeah, I made progress? And from you being able to make that choice, what then comes next? How do we continue the conversation? So, that's what we are doing. We're, simply put, we're overwhelming ourselves with everything. And we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to put the work in the buckets of the people who do the work. It's funny because I shared this with my mom when we were talking about schools and parents being a part of the educational continuum. And we should have that. We're going to have that conversation later on. But even as a parent with 2 kids, and my husband and I have these conversations, and I have this conversation with my mom often. Even myself, I have to step back out of the loop sometimes, and I recognize as parents, we treat teachers, or the notion is that we treat teachers like they should know everything until we feel like they know nothing, and then we know everything. We don't really walk a balanced line to ask questions, to open up the opportunity to learn. And so, what we're doing is really jumping around and not really being as comprehensive as we can to have the right conversations. And so, let me know, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. I'm absolutely okay with that. We can have that conversation too. I'm a big girl. I can have these conversations as well, because it's really going to take us into the next part of this conversation, right? Because we're now going to be moving into, where have we been? Everybody is going to have the same response, right? We're going to talk about the public health emergency. We're going to talk about COVID, but then also we can talk about a little bit of what happened before, when we talk about everything being on our plate. It could be the culture. And when I say the culture, it could be our pop culture. It could be the need to want to be seen, but not also wanting to be accountable for sometimes the roles that we play, in needing to having, in the need to have to open doors ourselves in more unorthodox ways. And I'm going to stick with the example of education because I think that is probably going to be the simplest way I can keep this conversation going, really. But you all hear my chair in the background. But where have we been? Where have we been when it comes to having everything piled on us and we can't make the decision about what to do next? We move on to what everybody wants us to move on to. We don't stick to what we know. We don't dive deeper. We don't ask the nuanced questions. We've moved in the direction of following public opinion. We've moved in the direction of we're just going to do what the slogan or what the quick saying is instead of diving a little bit deeper. And we have also allowed ourselves to remove vulnerability sometimes when we don't want to take blame for the role that we play, in sometimes the outcomes of those around us. We recognize that we want positive outcomes. We recognize we want progress, but what roles do we play sometimes in keeping that from happening? Every choice isn't the best choice, and we recognize that, and it could be a learning opportunity there. But we have to be accountable. We have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. That doesn't make you weak. It really doesn't. But it allows you the opportunities to honestly say, hey, I'm not clear. Can you explain? Where can I improve? What do I need to look at? Or is this my lane? that right there is a question that I recognize that not a lot of people are comfortable with being transparent about. It's not your lane. We have so many people in paths that are or may not be their own, where it could be that's just not their strong skill set, or they just don't have the passion to do the work. And yet we push them in these directions because of the money or because of the influence, right? And I'm gonna be completely honest with you. You probably hear my husband in the background, but that's a lot of like where we have been. Now, I want to really dive into like where we're going, because I see a lot of the progress. There's a lot of things happening all over the place, and I love it. But we're gonna take a short break really quickly, and then we are gonna come right back. Before we keep going, if you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to get your voice out there. That's who today's episode is sponsored by. Everything is in one place. You have the opportunity to record, edit, host, and distribute in one space, and it's going to be distributed to all of the major podcast platforms when you are ready to publish and get it out there. Now, when I say everything is in one place, I do mean it. This podcast is hosted through Anchor.fm. Now, the best part about it is that it's free. No gimmicks. I'm not taking you down the rabbit hole here. Everything is literally free. You create your account, you go in, and within a couple minutes, you're ready to go. You're set up and you're ready to go. Now, in order to get started, you're going to have to download the app on your phone, or you can head over to Anchor.fm to share and be heard. Now, let's get back to today's episode. And we are back, and we are jumping right back into today's episode. So we left off on where we're going, and I want to make sure I don't lose momentum on this. So the example that I've been giving in today's episode is really centered around education, because I wanted to build out on that. And I realize I've kind of, loosened a little bit to kind of reach in different areas, but I promise you, I'm going to tie it together. But I want to continue with the education piece really quickly, because when I talk about where we're going, and we talk about accountability, we're talking about having everything on your plate, how we address that, what vulnerability looks like. What I'm recognizing and what I'm seeing right now, and what you guys are really just sharing, is really that there are the right people to do the job. And when there aren't the right people to do the jobs, you're asking questions and you're learning, and we're making space to figure things out. I think from what I'm seeing, it's amazing. It's phenomenal. because with having the right conversations and with having these conversations, while there is this panic a little bit of needing to solve everything right now, you also see people pushing certain conversations into the right lanes of people, right? So we've had a lot of conversations about parents and teachers, which ultimately the impacted party right there is going to be the student. Um, and really, I think um, the largest thing I can bring us all together by sharing here is that a lot of teachers, have quit over the past 2.5 years, right? However, when we look at the sector of education, it is beginning to grow. However, it's not where you think it is, and it's not how you think it is. So in traditional education, you might see that dip because you do see teachers quitting and you do see them starting their own businesses. So they're moving into entrepreneurship, which is fantastic. However, what you're also starting to see at the same time is teachers are starting to reevaluate and reaffirm their morals, their values, where they are, where what they deserve to be paid, and what it looks like for them to really step out on their own, and to demand what they rightfully deserve. And why am I sharing this, right? So there has to be a balance between parent, teacher, and child. The teacher is not a parent. While the child does spend a lot of time with the teacher, the parent still has to parent. And the child may suffer if that relationship isn't going to be a healthy one. It's not going to be a balance. If it's not going to be a balanced one, the child might suffer. And so every relationship isn't going to be the same. And my personal opinion is really that if a teacher chooses to become a teacher, that's what they're choosing to do. They're not taking on the roles of needing to be a police officer. They're not taking on the role of needing to be that firefighter. They're not taking on these extra roles of needing to know how to avert a terrorist attack or a mass shooting in their schools. They're really there to empower and really fill the minds of the children and the students. And so, there's of course going to be different opinions, and there's going to be adverse reactions to maybe my opinion, which is absolutely fine. At the end of the day, we have to maybe go back to the drawing board and say, hey, how are you defining a healthy relationship between teacher and parent? How are you defining success for the student? How are you what do these terms mean? Because I think we've gotten to a space where we're going with old definitions in a new environment. And this new environment has really shifted drastically, and we're asking new questions that haven't necessarily caught up with everything. We're still trying to put the circle in the square hole, and it's just not working in all situations and scenarios. And you see teachers really trying to, as they always do, try to be creative and figure out the best approach to making sure that child is going to be successful, that child is going to be curious and ask questions, and push and break the mold and break those glass ceilings, and want to be empowered to be the best that they can possibly be, which is why you see this really invigorated generation of children now from teachers before. And I love it because I love every last teacher I had, just about. Of course, I've had like negative experiences in school, and we're not going to talk about some of those. But for the most part, I've loved school. I've loved my teachers and my educators because they really empowered me to push and ask questions and sometimes be a headache, but they made sure that I was the most successful person I could possibly be, which is why I'm with you guys today. The next part of that, when we're talking about where we're going, it's really not only to understand that language is changing and those definitions are changing and the environment is changing. The next part to this, though, is really going to be, let's be intentional about what is needed. And in order to do this, everybody has to play a part. And again, I keep making this about education, and it's not really about education, but I'm using that as an example. So let me open this back up to the larger conversation of there's so many things on your plate. There's so many things you have to solve. There's so many things you need to be a part of. But really take a moment and look at your strengths. What's in your lane? Where are you able to be that champion and say, oh, I've got this. I'm good at 1, 2, and 3. Let me prioritize what I can knock out the ballpark. These next group of tasks that I might not be able to, get ahead of, what I'll do is I'll reach out to a friend of mine, I'll reach out to a colleague, I'll reach out to somebody I'm close to in my network, and we're going to get together and we're going to knock this stuff out. And this is what that's going to look like. Or if you can't figure it out, or maybe your network can't figure it out, it's an opportunity for you to shift it. It's an opportunity for you to learn and maybe say, you know what? This isn't in my lane. This isn't in my purview. But it's an opportunity for me to network. It's an opportunity for me to figure this out and figure out what this new space can look like. Sometimes we feel like we know all the answers and we really don't. But we have to be okay sometimes with being vulnerable and saying, I don't know. I don't know. Because you're going to bring in people who are willing to have that conversation, and it's really exciting because you can be a role model. I don't care what age you are, and I remember telling a couple of youth I mentored a couple years ago, I was like, no matter how old you are, how young you are, there's somebody looking up to you. There's somebody who's looking over at you, and they could be 10, 15, 20 years older than you. They could be 10, 15, 20 years younger than you. They're looking at you because there's something about you that is driving them to do what they're doing right now. There's something in you that is pushing them to move forward. And so, with that being said, I think we're going to have all of these conversations, so they're really going to be focused, but I needed to have today's conversation to talk about the impact that we can have when we take the opportunity to just divide and conquer. We can create the biggest impact and be proactive when we aren't trying to give 10% of our energy to everything on that list. But if we have the space to plan, and we can do what we need to do, and we can address 1, 2, 3, we can identify who can take step 1, who can take step 2. And you know what? I do recognize that might not be a resource or a tool for some. Some people don't have that flexibility. Some people don't have that mental space to say, you know what, I can plan, I can budget. Sometimes it's going to be overwhelming. It's going to be frustrating. And so for you, I say, you know what, let's talk about space for you. Because it's not